Hi guys, so I would like to welcome you to protest number 83 with Jan Jaap Cannegieter. I hope the name is pronounced well, I'm sorry for that. I tried my best. But yeah, it will be about exploratory testing. We met with Jan a few months ago in Tessena while I was attending his amazing workshop that was like sorry, I need to manage the waiting room somehow. I will try to set the waiting room to be just a second. All right. So we met couple months ago in Tasana while the workshop about exploratory testing that was amazing, and I asked Jan to make a call or a talk for our testing community, and he immediately said yes. So I was thrilled that we can have such a great person and an expert in our community. And yeah, I hope you will enjoy the presentation, and I will just pass the word to Jan. Just few things that you are muted on entry, and I would ask you to stay muted while like during the presentation. And if you will need to ask for something, please do so and use the chat that is next to the video, and we will check the questions, or Jan will manage the questions during the presentation. And there are also a couple, how to say it, like icons, so you can react during the presentation. You can find there yes, no icons, and also if you will think that, or you will feel that Jan is too fast or talking too slow, you can use these feedbacks during the presentation as well. So I hope that's all by me, and hope you will enjoy it. Thanks. I will pass the word to Jan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marketa, and thank you for inviting me to do this webinar. If everything works the way it should work, you're now seeing the presentation. I can also see the chat. No, not at this moment, but I will regularly check the chat, so that will be no problem. Thank you very much for inviting me, and welcome to this live webinar. I'm in the Netherlands, and like in Czech, we are in a quarantine situation due to Corona, but still we can share things, we can join, we can hopefully inspire each other. Today we will talk about exploratory testing, and there's not one way to do exploratory testing, and that will be the main message of this talk, and we will see different forms of exploratory testing. This has already been said by Marketa. Please mute your microphone. If it works correctly, you are already muted, and questions in the chat, please. My opening statement. In this this photo, you see different men and women. By the way, they're all wearing the same suit, but all these different men and women are different, of course. So for some people, it fits quite good. But for most people, it doesn't fit. And that also counts for testing. Testing is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not that one way of testing always fits, is always the best in every situation. So you have to change your way of testing depending on your situation. So that's my opening statement. There's not one size fits all for testing. During this talk, we will see different ways of testing, and you will get an overview when to use which way of testing. And we will also do some very small testing, but that's a surprise for the people who organize it. Don't get nervous, it will be okay. Our world is changing. If I look back in the 20 years I'm active in testing, I can see that things are pretty different if we compare them to 15, 20 years ago. And we can make some comparisons. in the old days, people things should be more planned. We made thick test plans, etc. Now we're asking more for flexibility. We relied very much on the method, things like ICQB, glass box testing, TMAP. We really relied on them. Today, craftsmanship is more important. There was a very high focus on processes. Things like ISO or other standards were very important. Today, we're more goal-oriented. We had to test everything very thoroughly, and in some organizations, fast is becoming more important. Of course, in some situations, thoroughly testing is still very important, but we see a shift towards fast. And standards like the ISO standards for testing were very important. Nowadays, pragmatic is more important. So the conclusion for this introduction is that the classical way of testing, and I use this diagram to characterize classical testing, is not always applicable anymore. It's not that the classical way of testing is bad or wrong, but in some situations, I think most situations, it's not the best way to test. So this more ICQB way of thinking, yes, learn it, but also learn other ways of testing. I'm talking about different ways of testing, but what ways of testing are there? Well, we some colleagues of me and me, we gathered some different ways of testing, and we came up with 23 different ways of testing. That's a bit too much for one presentation, so we summarized it in 6 different ways. But if we look at testing on a pretty high level, we can see there are 2 main streams in testing. One is more the scripted testing, and here you see the same visualization again. The essence of scripted testing is that you make test scripts up front. So you have a lot of preparation. You make a strategy, you do some planning. We have a big pile of work, big chunk of time in design and specification. So we spend a lot of time making test scripts, and the test execution is actually doing these test cases one by one. Start with test case 1, end with test case 1000 or 100 or whatever, and then you're ready. But most of the work is theoretically done in design and specification. The other mainstream is called exploratory testing. And exploratory testing is really a different way of testing. It's completely different from scripted testing. If you've never done it, it's sometimes difficult to get an idea what it is. But in a sense, you don't do so much preparation. You start testing with an idea what you should test, with an idea what the system should do, and you just start testing. And along the way, you will see different test points or test ideas or test cases or whatever. You write them down, and depending on the risk, depending on the priority, you choose which test case you're going to do next. And this way you build your test design while you are testing and not upfront. And for me, that's the core difference between scripted testing and exploratory testing. Together with my colleagues, we came with these 6 different ways of testing. It's based on another presentation by Jan Jaap on the Agile Test Conference 2010. But I use it in a different way. So Jan Jaap's message is different than my message, but I use the visualization. And what you see here is scripted testing on the left and exploratory testing on the right, and some ways of testing who are somewhere in between scripted testing and exploratory testing. Let's first focus on the first 2. That's detailed scripting and global scripting. The essence of detailed scripting, I already explained, is that you divide the work in different phases. We first make a strategy and a planning. So we do our product risk assessment, And based on the product risk assessment, we make a test plan. In my current assignment, I'm also making a test plan because we're using pretty detailed scripting. And we spend a lot of time in designing a specification of test cases. And we make these test cases in detailed scripting pretty detailed. So the idea is that if the test case is written by person A, that person B can execute the test case. So preparation and execution can be done by different people in detailed scripting. So let me give an example. Let's say we're gonna test Outlook or another mail agent. A script could look like this. Go to the home screen, press the button New, enter in the field jcannegieter@squareist.nl. That's my email address, by the way. Push on File, select a document, enter a subject, go to the email box of Jan Cannegieter and check whether the email and the attachment is delivered. If you make it this detailed, someone else can execute it and you know exactly what to do. What I'm missing here is more the goal. Why are you testing this? Probably because you want to test if a attachment is delivered, but it's pretty detailed. A global script tells you more about the goal, but doesn't tell you about the details of the test case. So the goal could be make and send an email with an attachment to one recipient and check whether the email and the attachment is delivered. You have to understand the basics of the application you're actually testing to do global scripting. Because suppose you know nothing about email agents. That's a bit strange maybe, but right now I'm testing a system for administration of vegetables which are grown in a more factory situation. Probably you've never seen an application like this. If you get a global script and I ask you to test it, you will probably not very well be able to test it. So in that case, you need the detailed script. So detailed scripting and global scripting. Advantage of detailed scripting is that you have a lot of preparation and you know exactly what to do during execution. So you can plan execution quite well and you can let other people do the testing. The advantage of global scripting is that you don't need so much time for preparation, so you save time, but you probably need some extra time during execution. Let's go to the second and the third one. No, let's first see if there are any questions. And for that, I need to go to the chat box. And I don't get a chat box. As far as I can see, there are no new questions. So if you got any questions, please enter them in the chat box. And then I can answer them during my presentation. The third and fourth way of testing is session-based testing and bug hunts. What is session-based testing? Well, I gave you the basic idea of exploratory testing. And as I told you, if you do exploratory testing in the most extreme way, you don't really make a strategy or planning up front, and you don't do that much preparation. So for project management or for IT management, for the team, the developers, everybody, testing is pretty foggy. Nobody really knows what you're doing. They see you work really hard, you got the sweat on your back, and you're really testing all the time and then coming up with all defects, but they've got no idea what you're doing or what you will do tomorrow, because that's the essence of exploratory testing. And that's not what project managers or IT managers or team members wanted. They wanted to know what you're going to test, how far you are, and what you're going to do tomorrow. So they went from this big cloud to small clouds. Some preparation. So in session-based testing, you do a preparation, but not as detailed as with detailed scripting. And within the test session, you have some freedom. And that's why the smiley is over there, because the tester is happy, because some people, including me, think that exploratory testing is more fun than detailed scripting. So you divide the total test time in small parts. Maybe you divide the whole system in small parts, and for every part you do some preparation. But within the session, you have some freedom to do exploratory testing. So we work with test sessions. Test sessions usually take about 1 to 2 hours. And during the test session, you're only doing the testing for that moment. So you're not switching to your mobile phone. You are not answering email. You're really focused on testing one part of the system in 2 hours' time. You're making test charters, also called test documentation light. And every test session has got a mission and it has got test points. So let's go back to our test, to our email agent. For instance, send an email to one person, send an email to a group, send an email to some people and some people in the CC, send a email with an attachment, send an email with several attachments. These can all be test points, but they're not detailed script. They're only ideas what you want to test. During the session, you make notes, because after 2 hours, you got no idea what you were doing in the beginning and what defects you found, what questions you have, what follow-up investigation you have. Maybe you see some new test ideas, so you have to write down a lot. So it's not free testing. No, you have to make clear what you're going to do and also what you have done. And after the session, you have a debrief. I've been in this project where we did session-based testing, and we had several testers, about 3 of them, and they all had 2 or 3 sessions a day. 3 sessions was a bit too much, actually. But after every session, the tester came to me. I was the test manager, and they told me what they found. They told me what the quality of this part of the system was, how it worked, and what they should do next. This is an example of a project I was in. I took the picture of a bug hunt. What you see here are 7 people. I was number 8, and we were testing in pairs. And the problem in this organization was that when I gave the testers, the users of the system actually were also the testers. When I gave them the test scripts, they were global test scripts, by the way, and I asked them to do the testing on their own workstation. At the end of the day, they didn't do it because they had other work. So we had to drag them into a separate room. And we made we started to do these sessions from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock, or from 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock. And we were testing together. So every duo of 2 people got a test charter. They knew which part of the system they were going to test. They knew the test ideas, and 15 minutes before the end, we asked them what the quality of the part of the system was, which defects they found. We discussed them with each other. So we were hunting for bugs during these sessions. And that gave a lot of energy. It gave a lot of focus. We had 2 or 3 bug hunts a week, and within a few weeks, we tested everything. The users were pretty enthusiastic about the way of working. They were sometimes not that enthusiastic about the quality of the system, but that's what testing is about. So we tried to find bugs, of course, and this worked pretty good for us. So when you're testing with users, and in my current assignment, we will also do testing with users, bug hunts is really a very good way to test a system. So if we compare session-based testing and bug hunts, in both session-based testing and bug hunts, we have sessions from 2 hours, about 2 hours. We work with test charters. We have testers. We have a test manager, and the goal for both session-based testing and bug hunts is to get information. But the bug hunts are different than session-based testing. One of the most important things that in bug hunts, you're in a group, and when you finally get them in the room, you should do as much testing as possible. So in most cases, the sessions of bug hunts are longer than the sessions during session-based testing. And with bug hunts, especially when you're using the users as testers, you should give them more freedom. Why? Because they're not professional testers, so yeah, they're not always that disciplined. Most testers are pretty disciplined. Personally, I'm not, but that's for me. So if you ask users to do some testing, give them some freedom to just click around and test whatever they want, but also ask them, at least in your 2 or 3 hour session, do these different test cases. Bug hunts are often done in pairs, and a good side effect of bug hunts, especially if you have users who are testing, is that you get more info and acceptance on about the quality of the system. The last 2 ways of testing. No, let me first check if there are any questions in the chat. I promised to do so. Yeah, I see some questions coming in. Can we call the detailed scripting if we prepare it up front, or develop process as shift left testing? And does shift left testing bring any advantage over exploratory testing? A good question by Libor, thank you. In my opinion, shift left is something different than detailed scripting. Shift left is testing as early as possible. For instance, part of the systems who are not ready for deployment, who are halfway development, already show them to the testers, to the users. So you can do shift left with detailed scripting. You could also do shift left with session-based testing or exploratory testing or something like that. So for me, shift left and detailed scripting are 2 different things. A question by Martin. Can session-based testing be taken also as feature testing? So we identify features, weak points, and then plan a session for each. I don't know the exact definition of feature testing, but as you say it now, I would say every feature could be tested in one session, and then sum up all the things you want to test within the feature, and then feature testing could be the same as exploratory testing. But maybe if it comes to feature testing defined in this way, test tours, which I will tell later, are more appropriate. Then a question by Jiri. What do you think about the idea of saying that any testing is basically scripted? Because even if you exploratory testing, you are designing your test in your mind based on your experience, knowledge, culture, and execute the test. Or actually the opposite, all testing should be exploratory, because even you follow your script, written or in your mind, and explore the system when you perform action. Very good statement by Jiri, very good question. All the questions are very good, by the way. But I think that all the testing is both scripted and exploratory at the same time. yes, when you're thinking of a test, you're already designing it in your head. So when you're doing exploratory testing, you're using the skills of scripted testing, and you never purely do scripted testing. Um, yes, maybe if you automated it, that's of course very scripted. But if you're doing manual testing, you can't stop thinking. So you're also exploring things, you will be distracted by things, and then you're doing exploratory testing. So in my opinion, all testing is scripted and exploratory at the same time. But sometimes you're doing more scripted and sometimes you're doing more exploratory. Boris asks, how do we scale the team for the session? Ooh, that's a difficult question to answer because it will be different in every situation. The question goes on, why there have been that particular number of pairs in this example? Well, we had about 10 people who wanted to do the testing at this organization, and there were just 7 people in the room at that moment. I always ask the same people, about 10 people. Sometimes at the start we had less people, and at the end we had more people. But they spent as much time as they could on the testing to finish it as fast as possible. So there was not a special reason why there were 8 people on the screen. And if there were only 4 people, we couldn't test that much. Another question by Martin. But in bughunts, you need to somehow track progress and prevent overlay of testing. Yes, definitely. So we made some kind of grand design of the system and in functionalities, and every functionality was one test charter. So we had a total overview. I don't have a picture of it right here, but we had a total overview of the system, and we knew which sessions which functionalities we had to test, and they were blue, we're testing it now. They were yellow, we have tested it but we have some defects. It was red, this is really bad, or green, we can go into production. So these were all the questions I've seen so far. Oh no, yeah, I think, yeah, those were all the questions. So we go back to the presentation now. The last two are test tours and freestyle exploratory testing. And I'll start with freestyle exploratory testing. Exploratory testing, according to Elizabeth Hendrickson in her brilliant book, Explore It. Please buy it, read it. Exploratory testing is a style of software testing. Some people say in some books that exploratory testing is a test design technique. That's not true. It is a style of software testing. So really a method in itself. It emphasizes the personal freedom and responsibility of the individual tester. That's also a very important sentence because you as tester make decisions on the spot. You don't prioritize test cases or something up front. No, if you do real freestyle exploratory testing, on the spot you make decisions. So you have a lot of personal freedom, but personal freedom comes with responsibility. You're continually optimizing the value of your work. I will explain this one later. And then the most well-known part of the definition, by treating test-related learning, test design, test execution, and test result interpretation as mutually supportive activities that run in parallel throughout the project. What you saw with detailed scripting is that we divide the test work in different phases. In exploratory testing, this learning, design, execution, and interpretation of the results are mutually supportive activities, and they run in parallel. So you do it at the same time. The first second, you're doing test execution. Then you're thinking about, hey, what's it actually doing? Then you're learning, oh, but if it's doing this, then we should test this. Then you're doing test design. And based on the outcome of the last test, I want to test this as well. So then you're making interpretation. So it's basically pretty chaotic. But at the end, you have to show your coverage and that you tested it well. So you have to bring structure into the chaos. And that's it's making exploratory testing very difficult. How do you do this in practice? You already saw this, but I will go in more detail in this visualization. You start with one test point or one test idea, something you want to test. For instance, can I send an attachment? Can I send an email with an attachment? Or can I send an email to someone? And you just start testing. You will do you have this one test idea you start with, and you're going to finish that one test because the knowledge you will get by doing this test is valuable. But while you're testing, you will see 2 other test points. Let's say that your first test idea was send an email to one person, and you're doing that. And they see, hey, I can do an attachment. I can also send an email to different people. That's interesting. When you have done your first test, you have written down 2 new test points, and there comes the continually making the value of your work as high as possible. Because here you have to choose, am I going to do test point number 2 or test point number 3, which is the most valuable test point? In this case, you, with your personal freedom, you decide that test point 2 is more important than test point 3. So the next test point you're going to do is test point 2. Let's say an email to different people, to several people. And there you say, hey, we have 2 sending an email to people. We have also the CC. So we see test point number 4. And then you come in the same situation again. Is test point number 3 or number 4 the more important one? And this way you build your test design while you are testing. And that is freestyle exploratory testing in a sense. That can be pretty chaotic, and sometimes you miss some focus in your testing when you're doing freestyle exploratory testing. So a brilliant man, James Whittaker, wrote a very good book also about exploratory testing. And in this book, there's this one sentence: exploratory testing without good guidance is like wandering around a city looking for cool tourist attractions. It helps to have a guide and to understand something about your destination. Well, you're all living in the beautiful city of Prague. It's really one of my favorite cities, but I want to take you to Amsterdam to make you understand what test tours is about. Suppose we have no corona anymore, you saved some money because you don't have any possibility to spend the money right now, and you decide to go to Amsterdam. Let's say you come by plane, you take the train to Amsterdam, and you walk out to Central Station in Amsterdam. And you see this big city and all people, and it's fun and it's great. And you just walk in a straight line out of the Central Station. And then on your left, you see some of these beautiful old Amsterdam buildings from the Golden Age. And you think, oh, that's cool, let's go over there. And you're with your family, so your wife and kids, or your husband and kids. And you just walk there, and you walk past these beautiful houses, and you walk for about 100 meters further. Then something like this can happen. And I hope you will, the picture is not very blurry. What you see here is a family, a father, a mother, and 2 kids. And they ended up in the red light district, which if you walk out the Central Station of Amsterdam, and after about 500 meters you go to the left, and you walk 500 meters, you're in the center of the red light district. I've lived most of my life in Amsterdam, so I know where it is. This was not what this family wanted to do in Amsterdam. So maybe they should have bought this kind of a map with different points on it, which could be interesting. And in this case, the blue points are things that are good for a family, and the red points are maybe not so good for a family. So exploratory testing can be a bit wandering around the city, looking for cool tourist attractions. It could happen that you end up in the wrong part of the city or the wrong part of the system. So maybe you should have some guidance, some idea what you should test. And then James Whittaker came up with test tours, and test tours give focus to your testing. And we had this question, I forgot by who, and he was talking about feature testing. James Whittaker is talking about feature tours. So you make a list of all the features, maybe add test points to all the features, and then at the end, if you've done all the list, you know, I've tested all the features. Or the claims. Some people, some organizations claim our system is twice as fast as the other system. Okay, is that true? Or you can do everything on email with our email client. Okay, is that true? So we make a list of all the things you can do with Outlook, and you test it on your own. You can do the data tour, calculation tour, process tour. So tours give a focus on your testing. You're doing exploratory testing, but for instance, screen tour. Okay, I look at every screen if it looks okay, if it works okay. I especially like the bad parts tour. That's not for the Amsterdam. I don't like the bad parts of Amsterdam, but I like testing bad parts of the situation of the application. Mostly defects or bugs tend to stick to a certain part of the system. So if you find a lot of bugs in a part of the system, test that part more thoroughly than other parts. These are examples of tours, and they give focus to testing, to your exploratory testing. So let's go to the questions again.
First one from Martin Wawrusiak. In exploratory testing, do you agree that it's important to also know details about implementation?
Yeah. That was the question when I got disconnected somehow. It depends on your test goal. Suppose that your test goal is to see if the processes can be executed with the new system. You don't need so much knowledge about the implementation. But for instance, if you want to test all the connections, all the interfaces, then you need to have knowledge of the implementation. So it depends on your test goal.
Another one was from Libor again. Is there some best practice how to write what have you tested in your test session?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. You all have very good questions. Personally, I find it very difficult to make notes because I see something happening on my screen, and then I want to do some testing. So what I usually do is I record my test sessions by using screen capture tools. There's a screen recording possibility within Windows, and then I make notes later. There are also some tools specifically made for exploratory testing. Please send me an email if you want to know more details about it. You can find my email address in my LinkedIn. So is there a best practice? Officially there is. That's making notes by hand or using some tools. But I would say experiment with it and see what works for you. Try different ways, because the best practice according to a theory doesn't work for me.
Okay. Another question from Martin Wawrusiak. Do you think that security testing can be done by scripted testing way, or it's exploratory only?
I find that those questions very difficult to answer because I don't know the context. Depends on the situation, what kind of system is it. Personally, I found out that detailed scripting is not really my thing. I think tools should do it. So quite often I do exploratory testing, but it's difficult to answer that question in general. So let's get back to the presentation. So we got 6 different ways of testing, from scripted testing to exploratory testing. On the left side, from the detailed scripting, we see more focus on preparation, more focus on planning. We rely more on the method. We have confidence in the process, and it's more focused on documentation. The exploratory testing is more focused on action, is flexible, is more pragmatic, relies on the tester more, and focused on test execution. Again, I don't say that one is better than the other. Suppose I have to test calculations for a mortgage system. Please use detailed scripts. But the other time you're testing an app where people can buy stuff, please use exploratory testing, because app testing is more exploratory. Exploratory is most of the times more appropriate for app testing than scripted testing. So it depends on the situation. And yeah. There's also been some investigation about the effectiveness of exploratory testing and scripted testing, because some people say, hey, if we want to test it really good, we should do scripted testing. And if it's not that important, we could do this exploratory thing. Well, let's look into that. The first one, 2007, some people which names I cannot pronounce, they came to the conclusion where you can see the details in the documentation of it, but defect detection efficiency of exploratory testing is higher compared to test case based testing, as they called it. So we find more defects in the same amount of time with exploratory testing. Interesting. Another investigation by a lot of people, we conclude that exploratory testing was more efficient than test case testing. In our experiment, exploratory testing was also more effective than test case testing, with detection difficulty, type of defects, and severity levels are considered. So in this case, they also say that exploratory testing is better than test case based testing. And the third one is a book, Experiences of Test Automation, and they say the number of defects found by test automation is 9.3%, manual scripted 24%, exploratory testing 58.2%. Okay, so I use these figures a lot. Some people say, oh, we automate everything. And then I usually say, oh, that's fine by me, but we will miss 90% of the bugs. 91%, 90.7% actually. And then they look at me and then they say, this is according to investigation. So everybody wants to automate right now, but we only find about 9.3% of the test cases. This is mostly because before you can automate a test case, you should execute the test case, and that's done exploratory or manual. So we found the most defects by manual or exploratory testing. So if you want to test it really good, use exploratory testing. Now I want to know your favorite way of testing. And probably I'm going to give the organizer a heart attack right now, but I want to do an experiment. And I decided to do that today, so don't panic, please keep breathing. I would like to ask everybody in this webinar to go to menti.com, write down the code, open another window, go to menti.com, give in this code, and you will get the question, which way of testing is more appropriate in your project or team. You submit, and thank you for participate. And I will go to the back side of it, and you will see that already 31 people came with an answer. That's cool, it works. So the organizers can breathe again. And we see that a lot of people think that exploratory testing is the best way to do their testing in their project. That's cool. A lot of people, a lot of countries, trainings like ICQB or TMAP or things like that are very popular. They focus on detailed scripting very much. Most of the times they're very good courses, but not always. So Okay, let's keep this in mind, and let's go back to the presentation. I got another question, and we go to Menti again with a different code. Please write down the code 304638 and answer this question. Which way of testing do you master the best? So in which way of testing are you trained or are you experienced? Which way of testing is the best way based on your knowledge? And I can see that 37 people already. Okay, that's about the same figure as before. Thank you very much for this interaction. Which way of testing is more appropriate in your team? Clear winner on freestyle exploratory testing. And which way do you master best? Well, I was actually hoping that you would say freestyle exploratory testing is the best way to do it, but I'm not very well schooled in it. In that case, I would ask you to find a good course for exploratory testing. And I deliver a course in exploratory testing in Prague. So please, maybe we could meet there at the course. So yeah, there's a little less global testing. I personally like bughunts very much. I use bughunts very much for acceptance testing. That's not very well scored in Prague, but that's okay. So what we see, 6 different ways of testing. Depending on your situation, use another one. And then I would, with your permission, I would like to go to the chat again. I hope you liked the interaction part, and it will be, of course, available. This is a very long question. A question by Martin, but isn't ineffective to do regression testing by exploratory testing? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Martin. You could divide testing into testing it the first time and do regression testing, and test automation is mostly used for regression testing. So regression testing doing by exploratory testing is not a good thing. Personally, my opinion is that the future of testing is a combination of exploratory testing and test automation. So you test the new feature or the results from the sprints or whatever with exploratory testing. Maybe some detailed scripting if there are detailed calculations or something like that. And at the end of every test session, you decide which test cases should be in your automated test set, and this way you build your automated test set. Oh, here's the code. Thank you very much, Marketa. Automated testing is considered as detailed scripted testing. Yes, it's the most extreme form of detailed scripting, because you can only automate things if they are done very detailed, if they're recorded while you're doing it very detailed, or when you do something like BDD and automate your test script up front. So if you automated tests, they're really detailed scripted. And the code. Thank you very much, Marketa. That was very nice. I don't see any other questions, and we made the deal up front that it would take till 7 o'clock. So that means I have 3 minutes left for some final thoughts. Now, yeah. I started my test career in 1996, something like that. Maybe some people were not even born then. Yes, I'm that old, to be honest. And back then, we only had one way of testing, which was detailed scripting. And the first time I was doing that, it was new, it was exciting. And then I got to a second assignment, and that was also okay. And by the fifth or sixth assignment, it was actually pretty boring. You got functional designs, you made test scripts, and you executed test scripts. That was the work. So for me, testing was getting a bit bored, and I changed careers. I became a business analyst or requirements analyst, which is pretty nice to do, actually. I like it as much as testing, but I wasn't testing for 5 to 7 years. And then somehow I got back to testing, and I went to this conference, and that was really cool. I discovered for myself exploratory testing, and there was so much new stuff I could do, and so much more energy, and it really made me fall in love with testing again. So suppose you're doing a lot of scripting, please explore the possibilities of exploratory testing. Just for documentation, I put some sheets for further reading, some books, some brilliant books. By the way, I wrote about 10 books myself, but 9 of them are in Dutch. I'm sorry. The only English book I wrote is about the test maturity model integration, about the TMMI. Some articles you can read to read about exploratory testing. Some websites which are pretty interesting to look in for it more deeply. And before I have the last one, I will once more check the questions. Question by Martin again. Would like to meet you one day. Thanks for answering, and I totally agree that exploratory testing and automation is the future. What do you think about using machine learning for testing, automated testing? I could talk an hour about it. How do I manage to keep it to 1 or 2 minutes? Of course, machine learning will influence our world. Of course, machine learning and artificial intelligence will influence very much in our personal life. I think in 5 or 10 years, we won't have a car anymore. We will all drive autonomous cars, and we won't own them, we will use them. So yes, it will influence us, but there always will be room for some manual human-based testing, because the first time machine learning can only learn something when something is done. So the machine will learn how people will use the system, and then the machine can test a new version. But the first version, the machine doesn't know what the system should do. There are already some tools which use a kind of machine learning, but they do a kind of recording, and they look what you're actually doing, and then they're making some kind of test ideas or test suggestions. But there still will be room for humans within testing for the next couple of years, I guess. But please dive into machine learning and artificial intelligence deep, please. And it's not a question by Sandra, but time to translate the books then. Yes, yeah, that's a good suggestion, actually. Thank you. Maybe I will do so. My final statement is thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for joining this webinar. Thank you to the organizers, Marketa, Lucia, Sandra, everybody who helped organizing that, for giving me this opportunity. Stay healthy in these Corona days, and I hope to see you someday soon in Prague or somewhere else. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again.